Right, so it's 11 o'clock. I'm going to start this podcast on education and how, with my lived experience, my ideas on how it can be improved to better nurture um, and support children and families. I hope you can all hear me and see me. And thank you for joining me live now for the people who are here. And thank you for watching on record if you're going to watch it later. Unfortunately, Maddie can't make it today, so it is just me. Um, Maddie has a new role supporting families, send families, families who children need special education, have special education needs. And she has a new job supporting those families. And she's very, very busy, as you can imagine, the start of the school term. So it's understandable that she needs to prioritise that. So I wanted to originally present with Maddie. We've done a couple of podcasts together because we met on a writing course, an online writing course, because we were both writing about life after suicide, loss after loss by suicide. And I do mention suicide, so that is a trigger warning. I won't go into sort of details about it, but I do mention about well-being, emotional struggles, and suicide. So that's just to sort of warn you up front. And Maddie actually has published her book. We started the writing course in October 23 and she published within the year, which is brilliant. And that's her book there, Giving a Voice to the Child Left Behind, Navigating the Unspoken Grief of Parental Suicide in Childhood. And she does write about her school experiences here and also makes recommendations. And I will be making my recommendations as well at the end, ideas from my lived experience. And Maddie and I supported each other during our book writing journey. I started writing, and I will give you a bit of an introduction before I launch into the education stuff, because I think it's important to have that context. I started writing. We'll start at 11. Kate, yes, sorry, my message has just popped up and that's confused me. So I started writing probably in about 2022 properly, although I've always used writing as a tool to make sense of what I'm going through. Throughout my whole life, really. I've got a whole box of journals, and I've always used writing. I mean, I don't identify as a writer. I identify more as a sort of health worker, sort of healing, grief recovery. But I do use writing as a medium to communicate. And I first started writing 2022 because I found it quite isolating, our situation of after loss by multiple losses within a few years of each other, two including suicide, my husband and my dad. Very different circumstances. My husband had struggled sort of about 4 or 5 times during our 25 years together with his mental health, whereas my dad wasn't coping with my mum's cancer and near end of life. We didn't realise how he was struggling. So very different reasons. But it was very isolating because my son couldn't attend school. And I'll go into that in a bit more detail. And that's why I started writing. So in-person support was very difficult in everyday life, very minimal and difficult to elicit because of my own things going on and also, difficult people. It's a difficult thing to support and see in everyday life. And so I found online support really important and I sort of started more seriously writing. And then I learned a lot. I learned a lot about, through writing, the need for emotional connection to help myself properly grieve and support my children with their grief recovery and my trauma healing. And I'd had different types of therapy over the years, but what I needed to do is I needed to address absolutely everything in my whole life that I felt had an impact was impacting me, so I couldn't properly grieve and couldn't properly support my children with their grief recovery. So three main themes came out of my writing. And the main theme running through is the importance of emotional connection to ourselves and to our children and to other people and relationships as well. And that was impacted for me. And I explored why. And the three main reasons were the way that we are mothered, parented, and there's not to shed any blame on anyone. It's just parenting methods at the time, over the past generations. Emotional connection wasn't the priority. And I think it's becoming we're much more aware of the importance of that. Also, how we view mental health as well. That was a big one. And the third one was the education system, and how that impacts our emotional connection to our children as parents, but also how the child experiences emotional connection in school, because it definitely isn't a priority, is it, in our education system, emotional connection. It's more about achievements, productivity, and attendance. And I think my personal experience is that needs to change. We've got, the drive behind all of this is to improve well-being and mental health to ultimately reduce suicides, which we are seeing a mental health crisis, really, aren't we? And we are seeing suicide being the number one killer in young people, which is just horrendous. And so I feel that we need a much softer approach to education to address our mental health crisis. And so my experience was, I have got two children. One child sort of thrived to an extent in the education system. They didn't get anything less than an A in any of their GCSEs, their A levels, went to a top university and got a first class honours degree. Went to a grammar school and thrived in that environment to a certain extent. I mean, we had a difficult situation because of our multiple losses, which made it more challenging. But on the whole, thrived. I had another child who did not ever want to go to school from the beginning. So very difficult, completely different ends of the spectrum. And I dragged that child, and I'm not going to go into details because my children do need a lot of autonomy with what I share. So I'm going to try my best not to share too much personal details about them. And it's more about me, my journey, my learning, how I've learned about the nervous system, grief recovery, trauma healing, emotional connection, and hopefully focus more on me. But obviously I need to give some details of my children to give it context. So yes, I dragged that child to school from the beginning. And in fact, in year two, I think it was year two, we had assessments done because they hated school so much. And it was kind of, some testing was coming through that there was maybe dyslexia or something going on. But that's when John got ill with his mental health, or I don't really like to call it an illness anymore, but that's when he was emotionally overwhelmed and burnt out, and their priority was looking after John. And those assessments kind of been put on hold. And after John died, that child didn't attend school that much, but the primary school were understanding and supportive because it was all considered due to grief, but actually it had been going on before that. And then when we moved up to secondary school, I was like, this is non-negotiable. This child needs to be in school. And I literally dragged that child into school. And I was praised for doing that. I was actually praised for dragging him in. And I won't go into the details because, like I said, my children want autonomy with what I share. But it was, from my perspective as a parent, it was awful. But I felt I was doing the right thing. I was praised. Children need to be in school. That was the assumption. And I went along with that assumption that the best place for children is in school. And then COVID hit. And COVID now, the weirdness of COVID, the virus and all the risk and fear around that, and also the weirdness of lockdowns, and then afterwards when the children had to wear masks and stuff, that whole COVID thing is now considered an adverse childhood experience. So it is one of the things, as well as loss, as well as a parent suffering mental health struggles, lost by suicide. This was now another adverse childhood experience, the COVID experience. And so I could no longer, and I was not able to, drag this child into school. It was not possible. I could see on his face that it was not safe. I could see in his whole being, in my soul as a mum, in my bones, I knew it was not safe to drag this child into school. And he had been going, but he had been masking for the last year. But what happened during COVID, after learning about the nervous system, I now understand that what happened during COVID, his nervous system reset. So after being in that kind of survival state of fight, flight, freeze, fawn, the fawn with the masking, he was in an anxious state at school the whole way through. In COVID, he had time off, his nervous system calibrated. He felt safe. And there was no getting him back to school after the comparison in his system between feeling safe and unsafe in school. Now, he couldn't talk about what was it specifically about school that was bothering him. And because he couldn't talk about his difficulties, he fell through services. So CAMHS discharged us because they only had capacity if a child could talk. And because I needed support, they didn't have capacity to do that whole family support. They just did not have capacity. CAMHS are overstretched. Things are improving now, but I'll get onto that later. So we were discharged from CAMHS. We were also, our referral wasn't accepted by the paediatricians either, because they said it was the reason that he was struggling to attend school was because it was emotional reasons. And so we kind of fell through services. I had nowhere to go to give an explanation for his school difficulties, which school needed. School are under a lot of pressure for children to attend school. They get punished. They get punished if children aren't attending school, and parents get punished. So school were really putting the pressure on for my son to attend school. And all the way through, we're saying that school is the best place for my son, even though I knew as a mum that it wasn't safe. And I had this went on for about a year, and after about a year, I was even threatened with legal proceedings that if we didn't get him into school, that actually the school would have to seek legal help to pressurise him somehow. So the assumption was that I wasn't doing enough, that somehow I wasn't motivated enough, I was maybe too lazy, and I just wasn't. In fact, I heard, because what they did do, which was really helpful, they did offer us a family worker. So the family worker was great because she would come. Initially, I think it was to check up on us for safeguarding issues, which is fair enough. You know, she came every week and she did listen. She listened, she understood. I didn't feel that the school or any of the school services, even the pastoral care, had the capacity to really listen to what I was trying to explain. And my son certainly couldn't talk. And talking is difficult when you're suffering complex grief and trauma, because talking therapy isn't always relevant for complex grief and trauma, because complex grief and trauma is held in the whole being, in the whole mind and body system. And so talking therapy isn't always helpful. And I had experience of specialist trauma treatment, EMDR, which was really helpful, but that isn't available in CAMHS. Um, so yes, after about a year, I was threatened with legal proceedings, and I then had to seek other ways to get help because paediatrics weren't offering me any help. CAMHS weren't offering me any help. So I applied for parental education healthcare plan because I'd read somewhere that actually that will make the school more supportive. And I was hoping that would then reduce pressure. And I was told by the LA, I was given incorrect advice that I would never get one for our case. They said it just isn't relevant. Your case just isn't relevant for an education healthcare plan. But I did apply. And after 2 years, 2 tribunals, we eventually won an education healthcare plan for emotional reasons. So, and by then, after that first year, and because I was seeking that education healthcare plan, we were getting assessments and stuff like that done. The school had to then lessen their pressure, because they were getting more insight from the education psychologist who came and did assessments. They then got more of an idea of what was going on for us, because for some reason they couldn't understand what was going on for us. And yes, I saw it. I was talking about a family worker. She was coming in once a week and she was really helpful. But what I did glean from that was that the LA was saying, why doesn't she just make life easy for herself and get her child into school? As if I wasn't trying my best. And yes, it still sits with me, kind of the anger, I suppose, and the distress of all of this. And I think with everything that I write about, I have found peace with a lot of my story and my experiences. And I think it's the school thing that still stays with me, because it was so difficult on top of everything else as a parent. When I was isolated, I had to stop my NHS job that I'd had for 30 years, my career as a state registered dietitian. I had to stop my career to be home for my son, and relationships broke down. A romantic relationship, friends. I wasn't able to see friends because my role at home became full-time supporting our family and my son at home. And so, yeah, it wasn't a case of lack of motivation or laziness. I didn't choose this. And my son, over 2 years, he drip fed me reasons for his school difficulties, and he wasn't able to talk about them in one go. It was just things that came through. And he said that the first thing he did was he showed me a video on YouTube, and it's called I Sued the School System, and it's a rapper. And he shows, and it's a bit like the tree where you've got the fish, the kangaroo, the elephant, the monkey, and a teacher is telling the child animals to climb the tree. And for our children, that's how it feels like. That school is a very rigid, inflexible system. It suits some. It suited my daughter, but it did not suit my son. And this video was very enlightening for me, because it was like, I get it. I get now what my son is explaining. It was things that would have helped him, less subjects. Children have to do so many subjects, and so many of them felt irrelevant to his life and to his future life. And the amount of energy it took for him to focus and concentrate on subjects that were of no meaning to him was overwhelming. So he would come back from school exhausted. There wasn't enough movement to counteract, or time off socialising with his friends to counteract and balance that level of concentration needed to focusing classes where the subjects were boring. And education shouldn't be boring. We are wired to learn. We are wired to find out more. And it shouldn't be boring. And that boredom for some children is very, very anxiety provoking. He needed to have a lot more time for self-directed learning. And in fact, what he did is we didn't deregister from school. We finally got support after about a year. The deputy head took over our case, and then they allowed my son to do his learning for his GCSEs using the school's online homework platform. I think it was created during COVID. And he did all his learning using this online platform through his PC. And so that self-directed way of learning really suited my son. And he did pass his exams. He did 5 GCSEs. He was very sensible. He screened it down to what he needed for next steps, to go to college. That's what he wanted to do. And so he passed his 5 at home with my support. But really, he did a lot of it himself. So he really needed that self-directed approach. I think there were sensory sensitivities as well. Maybe it's neurodivergence, or maybe it's the trauma, the complex grief, but things like the school uniform, things like lunch, those things had an impact. Start time was an issue as well. And I think I've seen research that if schools start later for our teenagers, especially our teenage boys, I think it's something like sickness reduces by about 50%, attendance improves, and performance improves. And so my son grew. He grew so much in those 3 years at home. He had stretch marks in the back of his legs, in the back of his back. So you can imagine what development and brain development and growth was going on in his brain. And his sleep as well. So it's very common for teenagers that his sleep was very impacted by this massive growth. And in fact, he tried melatonin, which helped, and he tried vitamin D, which helped, and things like that. So, but at one point, he wasn't going to sleep until 4 a.m, and he was sleeping till 4 p.m. And I think maybe that was with his complex grief when it was at his worst. He needed that time at home for mainly, not necessarily for his learning, but his grief recovery. Whereas with my daughter, who managed the school all the way through, she very much has needed that time, that space for her grief recovery afterwards. And it's impacted both children, but in different ways. They've needed space for their grief recovery, which will be ongoing for life. I'm pretty sure it'll be ongoing for life. But they've needed space at different times. So, yes, those are a few things that my son has explained he's needed. He's doing great now. He did try college, didn't really get on with college. It was 3 hours travelling as well, which didn't help. But he managed for 2 terms and he tried. And now he's working, it's an informal apprenticeship as a carpenter, and he loves it. He's getting up at 7. There's no issue at all. There's no coercion. There's no pressure. He's self-motivated. He needs that self-directed life approach, I suppose. That's what he needs. And that's why school was so difficult for him. So going back to my situation as a parent, I talked about our situation slip through services. Also, how it's very difficult when schools are being punished for attendance difficulties. It's very difficult for schools to have the capacity to really listen to what parents are going through. They just don't have the capacity or time for it. So that is definitely something that needs to change. That schools, the ideas I have for schools is that they need the capacity, and that obviously it's systems. It changes in the systems, isn't it? teachers' role should be more than offering learning. And if they were able to prioritise the emotional side of care for a child by less subjects, they would have time. Pastoral care for my son he couldn't access that. He would only access connection with somebody that he knew. And that was the other issue. There was no consistency in the year that he went back after COVID. No consistency. Every single teacher was a different person. And I think children like my son need that consistency. They need that emotional connection. They need that somebody that they know well to connect with, to check in with, him to check in and the teacher to check in. And I think that would have maybe buffered a little bit after the weirdness of COVID if he'd had that one consistent teacher. And I think teachers need to have that as part of their work role. I think that pastoral role needs to be adopted by teachers who are, who know the children better and work with the children. But obviously, the teachers can't take on that role unless they're given space and time for that. So parents need to be believed. So parents are not lying when they say that their children can't attend school. There's no reason for us to lie because we want our children getting a good education at school. Why would I want to be stuck at home? Why would I want to, have to be forced to stop my career and impact my relationships? It was lonely. It was isolating and lonely. I've reframed it for my children's sake as the most important role I had at that time. But yes, parents need to be believed. Services need to work together around families. And this is happening, this is changing, this is improving in our area anyway, in Dorset. And I'm intending SEND meetings where the council are feeding back to parents the changes that are going on. But they are going to be slow. They are going to take a long time to implement it because the budget for CAMHS is minimal. And all of the CAMHS stuff is going into schools. So when children can't attend school, when they're at home, is there going to be any support for those children? I don't know. But I am hopeful that things are slowly improving. I definitely think that the LA need to stop asserting that needs to be a tier 4 consultant involved to explain school attendance difficulties, because we couldn't access a consultant. We couldn't access a CAMHS consultant. We couldn't access a paediatrician. Eventually we did, but it took 2 years. I think schools need to have a whole trauma-informed approach, not just a 2-hour training session. I think it needs to go much deeper than that. It needs to focus on the importance of emotional connection so that children's nervous systems are regulated so they're not in this fight, flight, freeze, fawn state that we see them in a lot of children in school. And those emotions are driving those nervous states, which are causing the bad behaviours. And it's the behaviours are due to underlying big emotions that are not being supported. And so that's what I mean by a trauma-informed approach. We need to understand where these behaviours are coming from and support the underlying emotions, not use punishment, because punishment doesn't work. Punishment makes it worse. I think with schools, we need to stop this assumption that good attendance equals good performance. Good attendance is dependent on emotional struggles being supported and unmet needs also being delivered. And at the moment, that's often not available or possible. And so we need to stop this assumption that good attendance equals good performance. And therefore, that's the reason why we should bully our children into school. That needs to stop, that assumption. Schools need to understand about masking and the nervous states. And like I said before, children can present in a fight, state, flight, state, freeze, or fawn. And fawn is the masking, where they appear to be okay in school, but actually they're not. And it's the parents that are telling you our children aren't in school, are not happy in school. You need to believe that. And fundamentally, the school system is over a century old and hasn't really been updated that much since. Too many subjects that children aren't allowed to talk to each other in class. Children learn the most when they talk to each other, when they learn from each other. And I know this is happening in some subjects, and I know this is recognised, and I know it's changing. But yes, we need to continue updating schools, don't we? So, ideas for parents, to finish on that, because I've already been half an hour. So, ideas for parents. You need to feel strong to advocate for your children, because they don't make it easy. Services don't make it easy. Schools don't make it easy. The LA don't make it easy. Do that parental education healthcare plan referral and get that, because the government are trying to stop those. But until schools are changed and updated, we need those as parents. Otherwise, you're going to experience what I had. And I did experience other parents. I met one guy whose wife died by suicide. His 2 teenage girls were struggling to get into school. He had to work full time. He wasn't able to give up his job. He paid the fine, £800, because his children weren't in school. And to me, that is totally wrong. So advocate for your child and get the support you need for that. Education healthcare plan is one way to get the support. There's lots of online support, Facebook groups. I'm sure if any of this resonates, you've probably found Not Fine in School Facebook support group, trauma informed parenting. It's a very, very different way of parenting when you are learning about the nervous system, you're learning about the different nervous states, you're understanding where these behaviors are coming from, you're connecting to the emotions rather than punishing. It's a very different way of parenting. I was lucky to get one-to-one support with Dr. Naomi Fisher, who is a trauma expert. She's a psychologist. She's an autistic specialist. She's a specialist in alternative learning, and her webinars are great. Her book is great. I found a lot of support from reading that and her education. I was lucky to have a family worker. I also joined service reviews. I joined a CAMS. I didn't join a CAMS service review, but I did speak to some of the managers and made formal complaints. And be that complaining parent, don't take any of this personally. It's systems, really. It's systems that need to change. So be a complaining parent, because only then will systems change. And I got the PALS, the patient advisory liaison person, to help me with those CAMS meetings. And I met some lovely CAMS managers, and I can understand they don't get enough budget for our children. So that's why they're struggling. But we can only make changes if, as parents, we advocate for our children. I was on the mental health review for the whole of Dorset as somebody with lived experience of complex trauma, and that was really helpful. And they even had breakout rooms for people offering their lived experience, because it's recognised that it's very difficult to give that lived experience. And it's really difficult complaining. It's really difficult, being like, it's difficult for me today, but we're kind of forced to share our stories because to make it easy for other people, aren't we? The most important thing, so you can properly advocate for your child, is self-care. And that is easier said than done. And it's not something I can really talk about today, because it's just too big. But I do write about this. I have written a book called I See You, a mother's story of family healing after loss by suicide. And I do talk about the importance of self-care and all my experiences and overcoming those factors that impede our emotional connection. I do have a website called wholefamilyhealing.com, and I do have an email, info@wholefamilyhealing.co.uk, I think it is. But I'll leave the links down below. If you do want to chat more, obviously I'm on Substack. I write newsletters, and I started on Substack to learn how to write, how to spread this information, because people need to know it, don't they? And I had this unique opportunity where I was home for 5 years, and I still am, trying to create this new work as a family healing coach. And I had time to create this, to write this, to learn, to dedicate time to it. So I want to kind of, spread that. And the book has been with my beta reader. So when you self-publish a book, the advice is that you give it to people in your niche area. And I gave it to a head teacher. I gave it to a grief specialist. I gave it to people who had lived experience of loss by suicide as well. And the feedback I got from the head teacher actually was, out of everything in your book, I gave my manuscript. So the idea is that they read the manuscript and then they give you feedback so that you can obviously improve it and make edits. And she said that it seems that it's the education part that's the thing that you'll probably still cross about. And I think she's right there. And another beta reader said that if they had known this sooner, I mean, they've learnt it over the years themselves, but if they had read this and had this information earlier, it would have helped them earlier deal with everything after loss by suicide or any complex grief, complex trauma that impacts the whole family. I'm mainly focused on getting my book self-published, but please contact me. I'd love to hear from you through my website. There's a contact form on there. And I will eventually be doing one-to-one coaching, but probably more likely programs for parents like us group where I facilitate, chats around the important things, share our stories, share our wisdom, share our learning, and help each other. I write to seek and offer support. So I'm still very much learning, still very much healing myself, and it will be ongoing forever. So, yes. So thank you so much. For 5 people, I think, have listened in. I've gone a little bit over time. I was only supposed to keep you for half an hour, but I hope that's all been helpful. And please, leave any comments and contact me through my website. Okay, bye for now.